Good day, APUSH students. Mr. Connor here on April 1st, 2020 with a little period 2 review, the third in my series on the colonial period, which I'd gotten requests in the survey to make sure to review since it's the most distant material. And I should find out Friday the form of the AP test. So yay. Hope you got my important other AP update. I'd want to know, just want to let you know, I would never give you guys up or let you down. So I wanted to make sure you got that update. Anyway, I'm going to make another video after this with some short answer walkthrough. I'll post the short answers if you want to do them on your own. And then I'll post another video of me walking through them if you want to see how I think about them. All right, but let's look at the last half of the colonial period here. All right, so what's in this review? It's the Atlantic economy and cultural developments of the 18th century. So this last period is about 1700 to 1750, basically the 1700s before the American Revolution. So away we go. All right, the transatlantic economy. It's also sometimes called the triangular trade, although if you look at the map, it's certainly more complicated than just a triangle. Transatlantic is probably a better word to describe it. And the one word you need, if the Gilded Age is all about railroads, the transatlantic economy is all about slavery. Everything comes back to slavery. It's the basis of everything. So just example, the Upper South, the Chesapeake, Virginia, Maryland, they grow tobacco. They have by this point enslaved Africans, and now we have African Americans, people born in America. They are not from Africa, and yet they are still enslaved. So that is the basis of their cash crop economy. The Lower South, the Carolinas, Georgia, they're all heavily invested in slavery. In fact, Georgia, if you remember in the Taylor book, Georgia started out as a colony without slavery, and people petitioned to get it. So they did like reverse abolitionism in Georgia. That's how much they wanted it by this point, because Georgia isn't founded, I think, till 1740. The West Indies, of course, these islands in the Caribbean are incredibly influenced by slavery. Africans are imported there more than any other single region in the entire hemisphere to work mostly on sugar plantations. They're so exploitative, so terrible. People just die. They never reproduce pretty much a natural population. So slavery is the basis of all wealth. I think these three groups of colonies are about 90% of the wealth produced for the British Empire anyway. So that's where the money is. It's in slavery. And even up here, even New England, the shipbuilding, which takes off in the late 1600s, you'll remember from the last video, those ships carry these goods produced by enslaved people. These ships sometimes carry enslaved people on the Middle Passage. So New England is heavily involved in slavery. The fish grown in New England, a lot of that is sent, if you look on the map here, to the Bahamas, that area in the Caribbean, because they don't grow food on those islands because they use every square inch to grow sugar. So every part of the colonial world is affected by slavery. It's the basis of wealth, everything. Mercantilism, the system where you produce goods for the mother country. You can't trade directly with other countries. You send everything to England. That's all influenced by slavery, because that's what most of the goods are being produced. They're slave-produced goods, and then that makes money in England, who then makes manufactured goods through the profits of these slave-produced goods. I mean, it's all connected, if you see a theme there. And then the Middle Passage itself, which is the bottom of the map. Africans are not immigrants. Immigrants implies you want to come over. They are unwilling people. But the largest group of people being transported to live in the New World in the 1700s is Africans. So again, they're not willing people. Well, I can't call them immigrants, and shouldn't call them immigrants, but that's the biggest group of people coming over, quote unquote, is enslaved Africans. So it's the everything to this period. It helps you understand. I love to say it's just plucky, colonial, hard-working that makes this economy successful. No, it is slavery. So that everything we're going to do, we have to consider slavery as the context. There's Benjamin Franklin looking pretty sharp in the 1740s. Um, you know, there's a slavery connection there with the money he's able to make. All right, so two things here, and one, of course, comes back to slavery. One is white colonists seek to replicate English culture more. They didn't come over to be Americans. And by this point, they're actually, now that they've gone past the period of settlement and not starving, they want to replicate English culture. So there's Benjamin Franklin. If you look at him, he's trying to be an English gentleman. He's got the wig, he's got the fancy coat, he's got the Roman busts, he's reading probably papers important for England. To be successful is to live like an Englishman, an English gentleman. At the same time, American culture is also influenced by African culture. A lot of the food that becomes quote-unquote American, a lot of Southern cooking is African origin. A lot of things in language or musical practices have African origins. So really what you get here is, well, first of all, these two things are 18th century developments. You wouldn't see this in the 17th century. This would be 1640, this would be 1740. So if you're wondering, what's the difference between these periods? That's a good way to think of it. 18th century is more this influence of English and African culture. And you are starting to get maybe an American culture, combining this replication of England, but you can't replicate it perfectly, in part because you're not in England, but also because there are these other influences, unwilling as they may be, and that's going to develop something different. So that, I think, is something we're starting to see in this period that you didn't necessarily see, really. All right, other cultural development. This one also, I think, I want to say not distinctly American. There are religious revivals in Europe as well, but you'll see here. So the First Great Awakening, religious revival in New England, this sort of sense that after the Salem witch trials, this perceived maybe religion is not dying out, but its enthusiasm is waning. Even Harvard and Yale are starting to get more secular. So by the 1730s, there's a revival, this idea that you've lost your way and let's reclaim our religious heritage. Begins in New England, but really spreads through the other colonies. So I don't want to say Puritanism spread. What we've got here is an English preacher. So that's interesting. You get an English preacher who comes over, tours all the colonies. So what we're getting here is a very distinct American experience. By 1760, pretty much all the 13 colonies, as we know them, have gone through some sort of religious revival. So it's one thing we could say is in a shared American experience. Otherwise, I wouldn't say the Chesapeake and New England are otherwise culturally linked in other ways. Sorry, pause there for a second. And where'd it go? Oh, there. Oh, whoops. So one legacy of this is what I'm calling an anti-authority tension. So I don't want to overstate this. So if you look there's George Whitefield there, the preacher. He looks like an authority figure. So I don't want to make anti-authoritism a huge deal in the First Great Awakening. People are not rejecting the man and fighting the power and sort of, getting rid of the elites. George Whitefield doesn't look like a hippie or anything like that, right? But he's not a regular preacher. If you look at the picture, he's not in a regular church. Some people form their own churches, so they break away from traditional authority, like the regular Puritan minister or Anglican preacher, and form their own group. So that's a little anti-authority. You could say it's a rehearsal for the American Revolution, in that it's giving Americans a shared cultural experience of resisting authority figures and establishing something else. Again, I don't want to make too big of a deal with it, because Whitefield, again, he's not advocating overthrowing governments or anything like that. A lot of it's advocating having your own individual relationship with God, which implies you maybe don't need as much authority. So that, I think, is the big legacy there. All right, the other cultural development is the Enlightenment. And this is another replication idea, in that the Enlightenment is a philosophical movement in Europe, actually mostly France. So it shows the movement of ideas across the Atlantic, as well as economic movement of goods. It shows replication, in that colonists want to be like Europe in their culture. So Enlightenment, I don't want to overstate this either. Your average small farmer is not reading giant Enlightenment books in French or reading John Locke or something like that. They might get a version of it through newspapers. More people are becoming illiterate. Not everyone, maybe like half of all men by this point. So I don't want to overstate it, but its tenets, an emphasis on reason, using logic over religious passion. If you think of like the Salem witch trials, that would not be using reason if you're using spectral evidence. Natural law, like trying to investigate nature, A, for science, but B, also like, can we figure out the laws of human behavior? And then an emphasis on what Jefferson will call a pursuit of happiness, but that people should seek happiness and humanity should seek happiness. So if these sound like kind of everyday familiar ideas, I think that just shows how powerful the Enlightenment is today. That I'd say a lot of people would look at those ideas and say, yeah, that's kind of who we are. Well, I think the Enlightenment has a major influence on American culture. And it certainly influenced these guys. These names should look familiar. Franklin, that's Benjamin Franklin on the right. That's not him on the right, of course. That's from his autobiography where he was explaining how he was going to try to make himself perfect by counting up virtues and working on each virtue and making a little dot if he got a virtue wrong. It's a very logical, rational way to try to put perfection. So, Franklin's a great exponent of that. He has his Junto Club. Yay, Junto! This way of meeting and talking about Enlightenment stuff. But Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, these are all guys who read Enlightenment stuff. So, again, not everyone reads Enlightenment stuff, but some pretty major figures in reading Enlightenment stuff. So, that is my overview. I'm going to make another one of these. Look at the short answer questions. So, hope you're having a great day. Today I have my Brave Pursuit hat on, which of course is my band. Comfy hat, great music. I will talk to you very soon, I hope. Bye-bye.